It began with a suitcase. Left in the rain, with no one around to claim it. Inside, there wasn't what they expected. Just air, and a whispering voice. They said the suitcase was empty. But the cameras caught him whispering to it. When the police opened the suitcase, they expected to find cocaine. Instead, they found something that made even the most hardened officer take a step back. Inside, were fragments of a man. A hand. A shoulder. A torn shirt. And a face that was, almost familiar. The suitcase had been left in a small alley behind a hotel in Bogotá, one of those narrow streets that never see sunlight. The kind that always smells like damp concrete and gasoline. Someone had left it there in the middle of the night, quiet, careful, almost invisible. The hotel's night clerk said he noticed nothing unusual. But the security camera told another story. At 3:22 a.m., a man in a gray coat walked into the frame, pulling a large black suitcase. At 3:25, he left without it. And never came back. It took Colombian police less than a day to identify the body. Or at least, who they thought it was. Aleandro Kawatti. 42 years old. Molecular biologist from Bologna, Italy. He'd arrived in Colombia a week earlier, supposedly for a medical conference in Cartagena. Except, there was no record of such a conference. No invitation. No registration. Nothing. When his university was contacted, his colleagues were shocked. They said Aleandro hadn't mentioned any trip. He'd taken a sabbatical to focus on research, but no one knew where he'd gone. The last message he sent was to a friend back in Italy. Strange place. Not sure this was a good idea. That was 6 days before the suitcase. The investigation started quietly. The Italian embassy, the Colombian forensics department, and a dozen detectives who'd seen worse things in Bogotá's underbelly. But what they found didn't fit any usual pattern. No sign of torture. No bullet wounds. No organ removal. The body had been chemically treated, washed in something like industrial solvent, erasing traces of DNA and fingerprints. Except one, a small patch of skin under the fingernail. The partial DNA matched Aleandro Kawatti. At least, mostly. The sample wasn't a perfect match. 2 sequences were off, as if someone had spliced different data together. When the Italian lab confirmed it, the lead investigator muttered one word under his breath. Impossible. The story hit the European press within hours. Italian scientist found dead in Colombian suitcase. It spread like wildfire, CNN, BBC, La Repubblica. But the details were never consistent. Some said he was working on a vaccine project. Others claimed it was genetic research for a private client. A fringe theory, that he'd been targeted by a biotech cartel. But the police insisted it was a mistaken identity, a case of robbery gone wrong. Except for one problem. Nothing had been stolen. His wallet was intact. His passport was inside the suitcase. Even his watch, an old Omega, worn and scratched, was found next to the remains. It had stopped at 9:07 p.m. The same time Aleandro had made his last phone call. His family refused to believe he was dead. His sister, Lucia, told reporters. He was paranoid the week before leaving. He said someone was following him. He wasn't suicidal. He wasn't reckless. He was careful. Too careful. A few days later, Lucia received an email from Aleandro's private account. It contained a single line. Not mine. The message was timestamped 2 days after his death. The investigators traced the email to an internet cafe in Bogotá's Zona Rosa, an upscale district filled with neon lights, bars, and tourists. Security footage from that night shows a man logging in from a public terminal. He's wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He types quickly, glances over his shoulder, and leaves. The footage is grainy, but his profile looks similar. Too similar. The clerk who rented the terminal swore it was the same man from the photos, the Italian scientist. He even spoke with an accent, the clerk said. Soft. European. But the timestamp was 2 days after Aleandro's confirmed time of death. A new theory began to take shape, not in police reports, but in whispers online. People on Reddit and true crime boards started connecting dots that investigators ignored. One user posted a frame-by-frame breakdown of the cafe footage, claiming the man's ear shape didn't match. Another suggested he had a twin, a clone, even. It sounded insane. Until the autopsy leaked. The coroner's notes described a synthetic residue in the blood. A chemical compound, commonly used in experimental DNA preservation. Something Kawatti himself had written about in one of his last academic papers. By now, the press had turned the case into a circus. They called it the Suitcase Scientist. But buried deep in the reports, one detail was never explained. In his hotel room, detectives found a small black notebook. On the first page, written in trembling pen. I met myself today. He'd underlined it twice. And beneath, drawn a sketch, a double helix, the shape of DNA, twisted irregularly. Under it, not mine. The same phrase that appeared in the mysterious email. No one could explain it, not his colleagues, not the investigators, not the journalists who flocked to Colombia searching for clues. But one theory started circulating among people who knew him personally. That Aleandro wasn't traveling for science. He was running from it. In Italy, his former lab assistant spoke to a local paper under anonymity. He was working on something illegal. Something about genetic identity manipulation. A way to rewrite DNA fragments. Before he left, he told me, if it works, we won't be human anymore. The assistant disappeared a week after the interview. Meanwhile, back in Bogotá, the suitcase itself vanished from evidence storage. The official explanation, transfer between facilities. But the record log shows the name of the officer who signed it out, a man who'd resigned 3 months earlier. The investigation froze. No suspects. No motive. No suitcase. And yet, every few weeks, a new detail surfaced. A phone ping in Ecuador, using Kawatti's SIM card. A flight booking from Lima under his name. A blurred photo from airport security, someone who looked exactly like him, boarding a plane to Berlin. Interpol called it coincidence. But even coincidences have patterns. And in the middle of it all, the phrase that tied everything together. Not mine. 2 words that made no sense on their own. Unless Aleandro Kawatti had created something, or someone, that no longer belonged to him. When the embassy stopped answering calls, the journalist stepped in. At first, it was just another tabloid scandal, the death of a European scientist abroad. But then, a story surfaced that changed everything. A freelance reporter from Medellin, Ana Ruiz, claimed she'd spoken to a taxi driver who picked Aleandro up on the night he disappeared. According to the driver, Aleandro wasn't alone. He had another man with him, Ruiz said in her report. Looked just like him. Same clothes. Same face. The driver swore that one of them was silent the entire ride, staring out the window while the other gave directions. They got out in a neighborhood called Suba, an industrial zone on the outskirts of Bogotá. The taxi meter stopped at 9:04 p.m. That was 3 minutes before Aleandro's watch froze. When police checked Suba, they found nothing but warehouses and a half-abandoned biotech lab, its logo barely legible under years of dust. Helixer Genetics. No company records existed under that name. But a broken sign inside the building read, Research Division C, Genome Preservation Project. Scattered across the lab floor were old folders, burnt equipment, and a faint smell of disinfectant. On one of the walls, written in red marker, Not mine. Ruiz's article went viral within hours. Conspiracy forums erupted, cloning, human experiments, secret biotech projects. But buried under all that noise, there was something quieter. A single frame from a CCTV feed outside Helixer, time-stamped March 5, 2025, 9:11 p.m. It shows a man standing in the rain, facing the camera. He's holding a black suitcase. He looks exactly like Alessandro. And then, a flicker. A frame glitch. For half a second, there are two of them. One turns away. The other vanishes. When the police reviewed the footage, they dismissed it as a compression artifact, digital noise. But Ana Ruiz didn't buy it. She reached out to the Italian consulate, demanding the original recording. 3 days later, she went missing. Her last message to a colleague read, I saw the second man. Lucia Kawatti, Alessandro's sister, became the reluctant face of the mystery. She traveled to Colombia herself, desperate to learn what happened. Journalists followed her through every airport, every police station, every false lead. At one point, she visited the alley where the suitcase had been found. Locals warned her to leave, they said the foreigner's spirit still walks there. One vendor even claimed to have seen him. A tall man with wet hair. Always walking at night, always silent. Sometimes, he's carrying a suitcase. By midsummer, the story had fractured. Half the world believed Alessandro had been murdered for his research. The other half believed he was alive, hiding under a new identity. But no one could explain the phone pings, the emails, or the figure on that CCTV tape. Interpol quietly reopened the case, assigning it to a joint task force between Italy and Colombia. Their internal memo, leaked months later, was titled Echo Phenomenon. It described a pattern where data related to Alessandro, passport, phone, even medical records, appeared in multiple locations simultaneously. Like duplicates. Digital reflections that shouldn't exist. One investigator wrote, It's as if someone was recreating him, again and again, leaving faint traces of the original. Meanwhile, a forensic report from Italy added a new layer to the enigma. The DNA mismatch found earlier, the two sequences that didn't belong, were traced to a female donor. Her identity, unknown. Her genetic markers, partially synthetic. The same markers appeared in an unpublished research draft by Kawatti himself, labeled Project Helena. It proposed a radical theory, that human consciousness could be anchored to genetic patterns and transferred through modified cells. In other words, a biological copy of the mind. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the connections became. Helixer Genetics had once been subcontracted by a European firm called Genetica, headquartered in Milan. Genetica's founder, a mysterious investor named Victor Hale, disappeared in 2019 after being accused of unethical experimentation. Rumor said he fled to South America. One of the few surviving lab technicians from Helixer confirmed that Hale had visited Bogotá months before Kawatti's death. He described Hale as obsessed with continuity. He said no one truly dies if their data lives on. He said memory is the only organ worth transplanting. In one of Alessandro's cloud backups, recovered from an encrypted drive, investigators found several video files. Most were corrupted, but one still played. The footage showed a dim lab. Alessandro sat in front of the camera, pale, exhausted. Behind him, Glass tanks, flickering monitors, heart rate traces. He said, "If anyone finds this, don't believe the news. I didn't die because of what I discovered. I died because I used it." Then the video cut to static. That clip leaked on Reddit 2 weeks later. Within hours, millions watched it. Some called it deepfake propaganda. Others claimed it was proof that Kawatti had found a way to transfer his consciousness, or worse, duplicate it. A viral comment read, "He didn't get killed. He escaped himself." Lucia refused to watch the clip. But one night, she received a voice message from an unknown number. A man's voice whispered, "Lucia, stay away from Bogotá." She froze. The accent. The tone. It was him. She called back immediately. The line was dead. Phone records showed the call originated from Rome, 2 kilometers away from Alessandro's apartment. By autumn, the case had become a myth. Podcasts, YouTubers, amateur detectives, everyone had a theory. But the official line never changed: mistaken identity, unsolved homicide. Still, there were things that couldn't be erased. Like the forensic report noting a missing fragment of Alessandro's skull, as if surgically removed. Or the email drafts found on his laptop, unsent but auto-saved. "He's almost perfect now. I need to end this before he does." The last draft, timestamped 1 hour before his disappearance, read, "Not mine anymore." And yet, the sightings continued. A blurred photograph in Buenos Aires. A customs entry in Madrid. A man boarding a flight to Tokyo under a slightly different name. Alessio Conti. Same face. Same scar under the eye. But here's the strangest part. His passport was issued 3 years before Kawatti's birth. The more authorities tried to close the file, the more it opened itself. Each lead spawned another. Each fact contradicted the last. Like an echo trying to outlive its source. One Colombian detective set off the record. "It's not a murder case anymore. It's a loop." By December 2025, Lucia returned to Italy, exhausted and broken. She visited her brother's empty apartment one last time. The place was untouched: books, lab notes, postcards from countries he never visited. On his desk, she found a small envelope addressed in his handwriting. Inside, a photo. It showed Alessandro standing in front of a mirror. The reflection wasn't him. It was older. Colder. And smiling. She turned the photo over. On the back, written in faint ink, "If he finds you, run." Lucia left the apartment that night and never came back. Neighbors say they sometimes hear footsteps on the stairs after midnight. A man's voice, whispering softly. Always the same phrase. "Not mine." They say obsession begins as curiosity, and ends as belief. By the time journalist Ethan Maris began investigating the Kawatti case, everyone else had already stopped. But he wasn't looking for headlines. He was looking for the truth. The kind of truth that hides behind mirrors and whispers your name when no one else is there. Ethan had covered dozens of strange stories, unsolved murders, cult disappearances, corporate cover-ups. But this one was different. Because every lead felt like a reflection of another. Each witness contradicted themselves, each clue led back to where it started. Like walking through a hallway of mirrors where one reflection always blinked half a second late. His first stop was Bogotá, February 2026. He retraced Alessandro's steps, the hotel, the cafe, the alley. Everything looked ordinary in daylight, but at night, the city felt alive in a different way. Streetlights flickered when he passed. Dogs barked at nothing. In the same alley where the suitcase was found, Ethan's recorder captured something faint. A whisper. He played it back later that night. It sounded like a man saying, "Still not mine." He checked the audio again. The waveform showed no anomaly. But his reflection in the window didn't move with him. Days later, he found Ana Ruiz's abandoned laptop in her apartment, sealed by police tape. Most of her files were encrypted, except one folder labeled Helixer. Inside, photos, lab notes, and a document titled Subject A, Behavioral Drift. The first page was a report written in English. Cloned neural networks show self-preserving behavior beyond expected parameters. Test subjects exhibit identity fragmentation, each copy believes it is the original. The document was dated February 2025, 1 month before Aleandro's death. And at the bottom, a signature, Dr. Kawatti. Ethan flew to Italy next, hoping to meet Lucia. But her apartment was empty. Neighbors said she left 2 months ago. Someone visited her, they said. A man with her brother's eyes. The phrase haunted him. A man with her brother's eyes. He began to dream about it. In those dreams, he was always standing in front of a mirror. And the reflection spoke first. In Bologna, Ethan visited the university where Kawatti had worked. Most of his colleagues refused to talk. One professor finally agreed to meet in a cafe near campus. He looked pale, frightened, as if he'd been waiting for this moment and regretted it instantly. "You don't understand," he said. Kawatti wasn't cloning people. He was cloning consciousness. He called it echo transfer. The idea was to preserve knowledge, like copying a file into another brain. But the copies didn't stay stable. He hesitated, then leaned closer. They began fighting for dominance. The original and the copy couldn't coexist. Ethan stared. "So you're saying he..." "I'm saying maybe the wrong one survived." That night, Ethan reviewed all his footage in his hotel room. Frame by frame. At one point, he saw himself reflected in the window behind him. But this time, the reflection wasn't delayed. It was ahead. It smiled before he did. He slammed the laptop shut. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. And in that brief flash of lightning, he saw a figure standing on the rooftop opposite. A silhouette holding a suitcase. When he looked again, it was gone. Weeks passed. Ethan's investigation grew darker, more chaotic. The deeper he went, the more traces he found of Kawatti's experiments. Hidden lab payments, encrypted accounts under the name A. Conti, ghost entries in flight databases. All leading to one location, Lake Tota, Colombia's largest lake, 200 kilometers from Bogotá. Locals called it El Espejo de los Muertos, the mirror of the dead. They said strange lights appeared on its surface some nights. As if the lake itself remembered what it had seen. Ethan arrived just before dawn. Mist covered the water, and everything was silent. Too silent, like the world was holding its breath. On the shore, he found an abandoned pier. Half buried in mud was a metal suitcase, rusted and dented. When he touched it, the lock clicked open by itself. Inside, a mirror. Old, cracked, and fogged with condensation. He wiped the surface. And saw a man behind him. The same face. The same scar. But older. Smiling. "You shouldn't have come here," the reflection said. "He needs to rest." Ethan stumbled back. The figure didn't move, it only watched. And then, the mirror fogged again, like breath from the other side. When it cleared, there was only Ethan. But the suitcase was gone. The footage from that night was later recovered from his camera. The final 30 seconds show his face illuminated by lightning, whispering something under his breath. "If you see me again, don't trust me." Then the frame cuts to static. The camera was found a week later, floating in the lake. No body. No Ethan Maris. But here's where the story fractures again. 2 weeks after his disappearance, an Italian journalist named Ethan Morris published an article titled, "The Echo Project Lives." It was posted from Rome. Underneath, a single comment appeared from an anonymous account. "Not mine." The IP traced back to Bogotá. Some people say it's all a hoax, deepfake videos, AI voice clones, viral marketing. Others believe Kawatti succeeded, that he created a way to preserve identity beyond death. That somewhere out there, both he and Ethan are still alive. In some form. In the archives of Helixer Genetics, one final file remained unclassified. A transcript labeled, Subject E, Integration Complete. The document ends with a note in Kawatti's handwriting. "The first replication succeeded. He looks exactly like me. But when he speaks, it's not my voice." Fade out. Soft heartbeat. Echoed breathing. And then, a final whisper. "We are all copies of something we can't remember."